This episode of the Topcast is presented in collaboration with our friends over at Sheet Music Plus.
When you have a system in place, it ensures that parents, they're not wondering, does this teacher really know what they're doing? They know that you know what you're doing. They know that you have a process that works.
Hello, teachers. Welcome back to the Topcast with episode 257. I'm Emily Laney, guest hosting today, and if this is your first time here, then thank you so much for tuning in. And a special welcome to all of our Top Music Pro members. In today's episode, we are joined by Canadian studio owner and our community guide from Top Music Pro, Rosemarie Penner, in a solo episode. Rosemarie is now featured in our new membership course called Lesson Prep Quest. So we asked Rosemarie on today to share her behind-the-scenes wisdom about how to win back your time with lesson planning, plus some of the ways that she deals with online lesson plans, how to engage your groups online, her favorite app, and more hacks. Rosemarie is a writer and a boutique piano studio owner who has been teaching for over a decade. She has a Bachelor of Education with a focus on special needs education. Her website, The Unfinished Lesson, is her guide to all of the skills that take teaching and running a business from overwhelming to fulfilling, and she provides creative strategies and smart tech ideas to solve the challenges of running a business while keeping students coming back for more. When she's not teaching, Rosemarie loves spending time with family, baking, drinking tea, and baking vegan goods. So she is now featured in our new membership course called Lesson Prep Quest in Top Music Pro. This is where you're going to learn the best ways to plan and prepare for weekly lessons with interviews from 9 top teachers, including Rosemarie, Nicola Canton, and more. This course is for you if you've ever come up blank with planning for certain students, if you needed to reformat when you changed to groups or online formats, if you weren't sure how to plan for that, and even just up-leveling some of your existing frameworks. So we are going to find exactly how Rosemarie deals with planning for lessons in this show, and let's jump in now with a welcome to Rosemarie.
Hi, I'm Rosemarie. I'm very excited to be participating in the Lesson Quest course that Top Music Pro is putting on. If we haven't met, I'm Rosemarie Penner from The Unfinished Lesson, and over on The Unfinished Lesson, what I do is I help teachers get balance in their life and creativity in their studio. So I started off as a school teacher. I was both in the regular classroom and then also with neurodiverse students. But after we had our twins, I wanted to change. And so I became a traveling piano teacher, and now I'm actually an online piano teacher. And so because of all of those experiences, I am always looking for a more efficient way, a better way of doing admin tasks like lesson planning. You also may have seen me in the Top Music Pro community because I'm the community guide for Evolution. So by all means, once you've finished watching this course, go ahead. I would love to hear you say hi in the membership. So what will you learn in terms of lesson planning from me? Well, I think the 2 big takeaways that I'm hoping you will learn are that it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to take a long time each week. Even if you're a travel teacher, even if you're an online teacher, I know that both of those, it can seem like it's a lot. And also that we have to balance small and big picture thinking when we're planning. But I will get into all of that as we kind of go through this course. So what are the benefits of a really good lesson planning system? Well, first of all, having a system in place, it makes life so much easier. I love systems. I love templates. They make life way easier. But a good lesson planning system, it's going to save you time and it's going to save you energy. When we're recreating everything from scratch every time, it's exhausting. As someone who has done this, who has made this mistake, I can tell you it's exhausting. So when we have a system in place, it means that we save time we already have a head start on what we need to do. And it saves energy because we're not thinking about, well, what do I need to do now? It also helps our students because they have continuity from week to week. It means that we're spending less time in lessons trying to figure out how we're going to get our students to do what they need to do, because there's already a bit of a schedule or a bit of an approach that they're used to. It also helps parents have buy-in to whatever your approach is. Regardless of what lesson planning approach you use, when you have a system in place, it ensures that parents, they're not wondering, does this teacher really know what they're doing? They know that you know what you're doing. They know that you have a process that works. And it also means that you have a chance to look at the big picture, kind of where you want your student to be from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, but also over multiple years in a really easy way. In terms of favorite apps, oh my goodness, I have a lot of favorite apps. I'll be honest. I've been using apps in my teaching for a long time. As a travel teacher, I used to carry a lot of bags, 2 to 3 teaching bags with me to every single house. It's not worth it. And so I turned to apps to help me fill in the gap with, rather than physically carrying things, that I just did it digitally. I've been using an app called Planboard for years. It's actually designed for schools and for classroom teachers, but it works well for our studios as well. So it's an online app that syncs between any device. I have even used it on my cell phone in a pinch. I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing it all the time from there, but if it's an emergency situation, I can just quickly type in what I need to there. I use it in place of a practice page or lesson plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I have an efficient way of making sure that my planning encompasses all of the different things that I need from my lesson planning. And then the other set of apps that I use quite a bit are the Google Drive apps, the Google Drive suite, or Google Drive, I guess would be the better way to put it. So all of my clients, they have a shared folder, meaning I've created the folder and shared it with them. And so then I can actually take practice pages and other resources and place it directly in there for them, that my students and them, they can access it during the week. It works really well, and it's something that my clients were already familiar with when I implemented this, so it was a little easier to get them to buy in and to start using it. So in terms of streamlining planning, there's a few things that you can do, but I'll quickly share what my process is. So what I do is I copy the previous week's practice page, and the reason I do that is it's less typing for me. I don't have to rewrite stuff. I check it against each of my students' annual growth plans, and those are a combination of what I know they need to learn and also what their goals are. I update the practice page with any new activities, songs, etc. And then I just pull the materials or make digital copies as needed. In terms of my students, that might take me 5, maybe 10 minutes in terms of the planning. A big part of that is because the annual growth plans has the big picture, and so I just make sure that I'm checking against that. But there is a few tips. So first of all, make sure that anytime that you're planning, you know exactly what you're wanting to focus or what you want to get out of it. So things like, we want to make sure that each of our lessons is flowing from one to the next. But if we're only focused on the small picture, the week to week, we miss areas that we might have forgotten to cover. Maybe we forgot to do ear training for months, or sight reading, or going through theory concepts or terms, things like that. And so we always want to balance the small picture, the week to week, with the big picture. This is where the trajectory of where we want our students to go, or where they want to go. The second thing that I would recommend in terms of streamlining is to make your lesson plans, your anecdotal records, if you happen to do those, and your practice pages all in one. You may think this is impossible. It isn't. What I do is in Planboard, I have a template, and I fill in things that my students are going to practice during the week. There's a comment section that I put things like, for next lesson, I'll have this song pulled for you. Or for next lesson, we're going to start with your technique. Maybe we didn't get to it that week, whatever it is. And so it looks like it's a notice for the student, but really it's a reminder for me. This way I can have everything all in once. And because it's digital, I'm able to update it during, not after lesson. For me to send it to my students, I have it in their Google Drive folder. There's a quick way for me to share it there. And it's so easy. It takes me maybe 5 seconds at the end of lesson. And so I'm not spending any time outside of lessons trying to write down what we've covered or what we're going to do the next lesson. And so that way, when I go to lesson plan, it really is as simple as checking those annual growth plans and then changing a few things. It makes it a lot more streamlined than I used to do, which was having binders full of lesson plans that I don't even end up using anymore. In terms of group workshops or group lessons, oh my goodness, I love those. My students love them too. We do 5 of those during the year in our studio. It's the perfect time to overplan. We don't want to overwhelm our students, and we kind of want to go somewhat with the flow during lesson time. But this is one time when it's better to have more than you need than less than you need, because students, depending on their age and their temperament, they will take over if there is downtime. In my studio, we meet for 90 minutes for each group lesson. They're multi-age, multi-level. And instead of having private lessons, we do a group lesson. That way I can present at workshops or conferences. I can do other projects, and my students don't miss out on lesson. But it does mean that I need to make sure I'm on top of things. So the overall structure stays pretty much the same from group lesson to group lesson. And there's a reason for that. Students know what to expect. It's a lot less chaotic. When I was a travel teacher, my students knew that they would come in, they would take off their coats, put their shoes and their coats away, and they would just go to the table at my house, and there was a folder, and they would find the worksheet that had their name on it. It was easy, it was quiet, the students were focused, the parents were wowed that I could have all these kids in my house and there wasn't chaos happening. At the end, we typically had a snack and would just listen to music and visit. It was a great way for me to see what things my students were really into, but also get an idea of maybe activities we could do in the future, whether it was in their lessons or group lessons. And then in between that, tons of switching between activities. My studio, my students tend to be fairly young, and so their attention spans just aren't really that long. So we want to make sure that they're engaged the whole time. When I moved to online in my studio, it was certainly an experiment. And it turns out I actually didn't have to change as much as I thought. Obviously, we couldn't sit around the table listening to music and visiting and having a snack together, at least not in the same way. But there was a lot that was the same. There's a few things or a few suggestions I have if you are doing group lessons in terms of your planning. Keep it super interactive and make sure it's moving quickly. Plan for 5 to 15 minutes for activities. It's just no fun staring at a screen. So you want to make sure that your students are up and moving and doing stuff so that they're not going to be, looking over here and then all of a sudden one of your students has wandered away. Yes, that did happen to me once. It's awkward when you have to ask parents to go grab their kids and bring them back. So just make sure it's really, really interactive. My goal tends to be, whether it was in person or online, I want my students to be worn out by the end of the group lesson. So how I do this is I switch up activities. We will do something that's really physically active. We'll then maybe do some listening. Then we're working as a team because I'm always trying to build a community within my studio. And so whether as a travel teacher or an online teacher, we have to work a little harder at that to create that community. And then I also want my students to have a chance to play their instrument. Some of the ideas that I use for lesson planning is I think about, we could do digital escape rooms. Not only am I sharing the screen and they're listening to something, but they can work as a team, as a community to answer those questions. And so they're cheering each other on and they're really thinking about their answers. And it makes for a fun group lesson. We'll do improvisation. So say I'm playing a backing track, then what they'll do is they'll mute themselves and they will improvise on their instruments. If you have siblings, you just make sure that they can play in different spots. You can do dance breaks for group lessons. These are fantastic. There's lots of videos online, and you can just have fun dancing with your students. While I like dancing, me trying to follow steps on a screen, it's pretty hilarious. I'm not good at it. So if you don't feel like you're good at it, that's totally fine. It'll just mean that your students realize they don't have to be perfect at it either. And you can do movement activities when listening to music. So again, I like a lot of active listening, whether it's actively listening for certain things or we're using whole body movement. So then all of a sudden, when you're looking at it, things like rock music, pop music, if you can find clean lyrics for hip hop, these are all really great genres because it's very strong. And so the students can hear it on their side, regardless of what their device is. And you can have them off the bench moving. When I'm planning, I really think about the personalities of the students that will be attending, also their age, and just how much I have to wear them out. Some of my students, they can get a little bit destructive or bug each other, in particular their sibling, because they're sharing a screen. So I'm always thinking about, well, what is the group of students that I have for that group lesson, and how am I going to maybe head off some of the behavioral stuff that could come up if I wasn't really paying attention. And then I also think about energy levels. So I kind of talked about that a little bit. So for example, maybe we start off with something that's a little low key, then we do something high energy, then we do something low key, then we go high energy. There's always something that will be planned so that the students, they don't have too much energy or too little energy.
Sheet Music Plus is the home of the world's largest selection of sheet music. Offering more than 2 million titles, you'll find everything you need for your students, for yourself, and for every group you play with. Shop songbooks, classical repertoire, and piano methods all conveniently shipped to your front door. At Sheet Music Plus, you can also choose from hundreds of thousands of digital scores that you can download and play instantly, perfect for lessons and last-minute needs. And best of all, teachers are eligible to get 8% cash back on all purchases with the Sheet Music Plus Easy Rebates program. Shop today at sheetmusicplus.com.
So some tips for online lessons and for planning. I would make sure you have digital copies of everything. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to take your whole library and make digital copies of it right away. Absolutely not. It's not an efficient use of your time, and some of it you may not end up using. So each week when you do your lesson planning, if you need to make a digital copy of something, make it then. You will end up getting most of your stuff taken care of, but you're not going to spend hours doing it up front. Make sure that you get off the bench, that you plan that into your lessons for online learning. It's incredibly important. It also means that students don't have to make eye contact the whole time. If you can imagine that you're making eye contact, like you're in each other's personal space, even though you're not physically in the same room. So this allows your students to get a little break, right? They don't feel like you're watching like a hawk every single thing that they do. Onboarding is probably one of the most important things you can do. And yes, you will need to lesson plan for this. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a different section when it comes to parents. But onboarding is one of the most important things you can plan in your lessons when you're teaching online. You'll also want to make sure as you're planning that you have extra resources for your students. If you find that students or their parents are contacting you during the week saying, I wasn't quite sure about this, or was I supposed to do it this way? These are clues that you need to give your students more resources during the week. Part of the lesson planning process is knowing when to get those things done. If you're teaching online, it actually works out really, really good. So for example, that improvisation I was telling you about, if you're teaching online, what you can do is just take your cell phone, put it so that it records your piano or whatever your instrument is. Your student mutes. So as you play, they're going to improvise. You're not going to hear it. That's totally fine, because then what you're going to do is hit the stop button and you immediately put it for your student. So whether it's Google Drive or it's a different system that you have, but you're doing it in the lesson, right? The student gets the copy of the resource that they need, in this case, a backing track. You haven't spent extra time during your week, but they were able to improvise during lesson. There was no lag time or downtime for them. And then all I do is I just make sure that my students check, is it in your folder? Yes, awesome. Okay, we can move on. And I know that if you're just starting online teaching, it can be really difficult to have a multi-camera angle. What you can do, if you don't have two cameras, I would recommend set up the one beside the piano, and then you could use something like Internet MIDI or Classroom Maestro, where when you play your piano, because of the MIDI connection, it's going to show what notes to play. What I noticed is that I had to make time in lessons that my students could see an overhead view. Now, some of my students, they preferred seeing me play it on the actual piano keys. One of my students told me that my fingers were a little bit fat and they couldn't see the keys. I don't think my fingers are fat, but apparently for this student they were. And so the light up keys worked way better for them. And I have about half my studio prefers the light up keys and about half prefers the overhead view. With Classroom Maestro, you can set it up that they can see the light up keys. And for online, that works really well. For doing things or not doing things, I guess I have three don'ts that I hope you don't do. One, don't plan too far ahead. I know that kind of goes against the whole having an annual growth plan for a student. So what I mean by don't plan too far ahead is that, yes, we want to have a big picture plan of where our students are going to go. But if we plan everything, like this is how far the student is going to go in this song, these are the songs they're going to do, these are the exact activities, it takes away any agency or any say that a student has in their programming. And when students don't have a say in their programming, they tend to not stick with music lessons. So I would recommend, yes, you have that big plan or the concepts that you want to cover and your student has picked their goals for the year or for the next few months. But what you want to do is plan the little stuff week to week. That way you can adapt very quickly to where your student is. I would recommend don't write or type things out more than once. So this goes back to the make sure that your lesson plan, your anecdotal records, and your practice pages are all one and the same. I used to write down it was like a little square on a piece of paper each week. This is what we covered. And I wrote out the practice pages. I tried having my students write out their practice pages on their own. That took forever. I just felt like I didn't get a chance to teach. And honestly, it did take away from the teaching time. There was a lot more downtime. I prefer doing something digital, but regardless of what you choose, if you don't want to go digital, you could get carbon paper so that you can write it out. And there's immediately a copy for you and a copy for your student. Don't waste time writing things more than once. You don't need to do that, especially when technology can help you. And also don't forget to look at the big picture regularly. I think as teachers, it's really easy for us to get stuck in one or the other. Either we just plan week to week, which is super easy, or we only look at the big plan and then everything is based on that big plan. We don't necessarily pull back when our students need a little bit of extra time on something or a little bit of extra support. So finding the balance between those. We don't want to focus on one over the other. All right, so how do I involve parents? Well, going back to what I had said about onboarding, one of the big ways that I involve the parents in my studio is for the first weeks of lessons. And yes, I said weeks. It could be only 2 weeks. It might be up to 4 weeks. A portion of lesson they attend. Usually it's at the end. And we spend that time onboarding. For onboarding, all it means is that you are showing them how to do something, and they are doing that task along with you. So, for example, we use Google Drive in my studio. I send access to my clients beforehand. And then in the first weeks, we actually go through it and I pull it up on my screen, I share it, and they grab whatever device is going to be available for the student that week. Usually it's a cell phone, sometimes it's an iPad or a tablet. And I say, okay, I want you to go into the folder. What do you see? And we make sure that it's matching. Then we go through, okay, for example, the parent, I want them to print the practice page each week. I want you to find the to print folder, open it, and tell me what you see. Oftentimes I'll have put something in there that the student will need access to during the first week. And so the parent knows that they need to print that off right after lesson. The reason that we do onboarding is tech happens. Mistakes happen, or there's troubleshooting that needs to happen. A few years ago, one of my clients, they were going to be going on vacation for several weeks. And so I asked them to purchase 2 apps that they didn't require the use of a piano. Because of that, we spent the last few minutes of lesson going through those apps. I wanted to make sure that their kids really knew how to use them. The parents, if the kids said, I'm not sure what to do, they were able to help them. And ironically, it was kind of funny. We couldn't get sound whatsoever. We turned up the sound on the device. That didn't work. We tried, making sure it wasn't mute. That didn't work. It took about 5 minutes of troubleshooting before we finally figured out why the sound was not working on this thing. And once we did, then it was great. But can you imagine this family? They've purchased the apps, which, they're not expensive, but still, they purchased the apps, they go on vacation. The kids are saying, I don't know what to do. We don't want to ruin vacation. So it's better to do this in lesson time, because sometimes it might be that a permission needs to be changed or whatever it is, but it's better that you deal with it in lesson time. The other way that I involve parents is I'm really specific about what the expectations are. So, for example, involving the parents, when I'm thinking about lesson plans, I will put things on there like, make sure that you play this for mommy or daddy this week. So it's not that I want the parents to be providing feedback. I just want them to cheer on their kids. Other ways is, like I said, the practice pages. And another part of it is that they check the newsletter each month. In my studio, we do a monthly newsletter. That's where they sign up for the group lessons I was talking about and things like that. In my lesson planning, if I notice that a parent has not checked the newsletter, I will actually put on their lesson plan in nice bold letters under the, messages or the comments section, please check your email for the newsletter. If you need another copy sent, let me know. And the reason for that is that if parents aren't checking that, I know that they're going to have questions. I know that they're going to have concerns. In terms of my top advice, I would say, 1, keep students involved. Yes, we're lesson planning and we're doing that on our own. But when students don't take ownership of their learning, then we have a problem. They aren't going to really be invested in the practice. They're not really going to be invested in their progress. So when you're lesson planning, remember that my lesson planning takes part actually a little bit during lessons because the practice page and the lesson plan are one and the same. So I have my students, we do different practice strategies during lesson, and I say, okay, well, what is the best strategy for this particular song? What is the best goal that you could use for this? Something like, do you think that you can move this from hands separate to hands together, this small section, for next lesson? I think that they can. Chances are they will too. But again, my students, because they're making the goals, it really helps. It also means that if they need extra help with something, they have a chance to tell us, and then we can, in our next lesson planning session, make sure we grab those resources for them. When you're lesson planning, especially when you have the practice page the same as the lesson plan, just keep it really streamlined, really simple. I use a table format. That way it's free of distractions. And I just include really specific praise of what they did in that lesson, but then also be very specific as to where to find that practice help. So if I've made a backing track for a student, I make sure that the lesson plan / practice page, it says where to find that backing track, right? Go into your folder, and under the backing track folder, that's where you're going to find it. Or it could be something like new music. So you can add links to your practice page. It means that on the practice page / lesson plan, you can just click on that. That way students, and if the parents are the ones purchasing it, the parents can see what it looks like in lesson, because if you're sharing the screen, whether it's your phone, whether it's a tablet, or if you're teaching online, you're using the share screen function, then they can see it. And then the other thing I'll do is I will take that link from my lesson plan and I will email or text it directly to the parent or student, whoever's in charge of getting that new music. So that way they can take care of it in lesson, or they just take care of it right after lesson. So I hope that this peek into my lesson planning process helps you out. It was really great to be able to find out about this project, and I'm really looking forward to everybody else's parts to this course, because honestly, I love hearing new ideas. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in the membership, and I will be more than happy to answer those. If you are looking for more information outside of our community, there's lots of stuff here in Top Music. But if you want to get a hold of me, you can go to theunfinishedlesson.com, and there's lots of articles and resources there. You can find me on social media. All those links are on the website at the bottom. And I hope that you reach out and let me know how your lesson planning is going.
So a big thanks again to Rosemarie Penner for sharing her lesson planning advice today. To find Rosemarie's links and the course mentioned in this show, tap the show notes page in your podcast app or head to topmusic.co. This is Emily Laney, and you've been listening to the Topcast.
For more information about this episode and to find out how to enhance your own teaching, visit topmusic.co. You'll find everything you need for your studio, from lesson plans to cheat sheets, quick win teaching ideas, and guides on how to build your teaching business. Plus, you'll be connected to a global community of the world's top music teachers. And when you're ready, join hundreds of other teachers around the world by becoming a Top Music Pro member and get access to all our bonus content and flagship courses. And don't forget to follow topmusic.co on social media and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. That's all for today. We'll see you in the studio.